Am I the antagonist for how I checked my pregnant neighbor, for how she was acting with my husband? My family, myself, husband, 2 daughters, live directly across from our neighbor, Addie, who is, from what I remember, 6 months pregnant. Our neighborhood grew close when her husband died 2 months ago due to a drunk driver. The entire neighborhood basically came to help, and even now the community still does semi-monthly-ish barbecues and stuff. We know how it felt to have a parent absent. Now, no, my husband did not die, but he was still deployed when we were pregnant with our first. I know that this is not the same thing she is going through. So we often checked on her, invited her over, had conversations on how to handle being on your own while pregnant. For a couple of weeks now, she's been asking my husband to be her handyman. My husband has no issue with this, and neither did I until a week or so ago. She asks my husband for help over the simplest things and barely talks to me anymore. Most times she'll knock, ask if my husband is home, and if I say no, she tells me to let him know she needs him and walks off. No talking, having tea together, nothing. I can admit I am a little bit jealous and felt weird about this. It was like she was only wanting my husband around. I tried to push these feelings aside until the first incident. Basically, she knocked on my door and handed a covered plate of cookies. I got excited and started to thank her, how the girls love cookies, but she interrupted me and told me that these were strictly for my husband, not for us. I had a sour taste in my mouth and thanked her. It made me feel like she was trying to have a big house and little house situation. I let my husband know what happened and how I felt. He assured me nothing was going on, no doubt, but he also agreed that what she did was disrespectful. We agreed he would stop going over. He would give her the numbers of men he knows who do maintenance. She has been cold with us. The second incident happened when the community was having a barbecue in our neighborhood park. The children were running around and us adults were sitting with the lawn chairs talking about whatever. Abe piped up and said how she is grateful to us all for helping her, even me, after it was strange how you basically forbid your husband to come over to help anymore. I got a little mad, like I was slapped by God himself, and just said, well, baking a gift for my husband only and saying his wife and daughters aren't included is strange too. Another neighbor changed the topic. It was awkward. I'm sure there's gossip and whatnot. On one hand, I know she must still be grieving and maybe she's just looking to have someone to be there for her. On the other hand, I feel like the incident with the cookies and then the barbecue makes me feel disrespected. My husband is not happy with how I responded. He says it is not my job to check someone and I should have just let her talk. I guess I just want to know if I was a jealous asshole through all of this. I don't really have anyone I could talk to about this personally. It sounds like you've been understanding and supportive towards your neighbor during a difficult time, which is commendable. However, it's completely reasonable to feel uncomfortable when boundaries are crossed, like with the incident involving the cookies. It's important to communicate your feelings openly and honestly with your husband, and try to find a resolution together. Am I the antagonist for telling my child they need to get a job if they want to date their partner? My 43-year-old female son is 16. He loves sports and does a different sport each season. Cross country during fall, wrestling during winter, track and field during spring, and he also does wrestling camp during the summer. He doesn't have a job and I have never pressured him to. He doesn't have an allowance, but I buy him what he wants within reason. If he wants new clothes or shoes, I buy them. If he wants to go eat a nice meal at a restaurant, I'll take him. If there's a new movie coming out he wants to go to, I'll take him to it. He recently started dating a girl from his track and field team. I've met her recently, and she seems like a nice girl. I paid for the first couple of dates, but as the relationship has started to get more serious, they've gone on more dates and to more expensive places. For example, their first date was literally at Starbucks, so I just gave him some money for coffee and a snack. But now he started taking her out to the movies and more expensive restaurants. He also started buying her gifts like chocolates. I've sat my son down and told him that he'll need to get a job so he can pay for his dates if he wants to continue dating his girlfriend and taking her on dates. He really doesn't want to, as he loves sports and going to a job after school means he wouldn't be able to attend his practices and tournaments. I've tried to negotiate by saying he could get a job on the weekends, but then he said he wouldn't have any time to study or do homework. I've explained to my son that part of growing up is choosing what's important to you. Does he want to continue doing sports or dating his girlfriend? I did sports my first year of high school and loved it too. But due to my family's financial situation, I had to start working when I was only 15 years old and never did sports again. He's pretty mad and been sulking a lot recently. I've talked with some friends and family members about my decisions to make my son get a job if he wants to continue dating. And while some agree, some think I should just pay for my son's dates since I'm risking him resenting me for either making him break up with his girlfriend or making him quit sports. So Reddit, am I the a-hole? It sounds like you're being a supportive and caring parent by encouraging your son to learn the value of financial responsibility. Balancing sports, dating, and work can be tough, but it's a valuable lesson in prioritizing and managing time. Keep up the good parenting. Am I the antagonist for speaking to my sister-in-law's caseworker on behalf of her former foster child, which got the child removed from sister-in-law and her husband's care? My sister-in-law, husband's older sister, and her husband, my husband's brother-in-law, are foster parents. From November of last year to February of this year, they had a foster daughter, May Dwight. May was in foster care because her mother was addicted to drugs and was deemed unfit and unsafe for May to continue living with her. May is 13 years old. She was removed from her mother at the age of 10 and does still have visits with her mother. May loves her mother. This was clear from day one of her moving into my sister-in-law's house. My sister-in-law and her husband were not understanding of May loving her mother. They would actively discourage her from wanting more access to her mother. May was writing letters to her mother, and they read those and asked her why she would give up any stable home to go back to a dangerous life. It was so difficult for May, and she reported my sister-in-law and her husband to the caseworker, but the caseworker didn't trust what May was saying. My sister-in-law and her husband would say these things around my husband, myself, and their extended family. I am also a former foster child and a child of an addict, and I 10,000% understand May. So I attempted to explain to my sister-in-law and her husband that they were not helping May by disparaging her mother, and that many foster kids love and miss and want their parents, and being an addict doesn't change that. My sister-in-law told me it was none of my business, and they did not want me to interfere again. May heard me speak to them, and she opened up about how unhappy she was with my sister-in-law and her husband, and how frequent their disparaging comments about her mother or discouragement of her loving her mother happened. She was feeling so desperate and said they didn't get it. My husband told my sister-in-law she should be more open to hearing my experiences as a foster child, but she told him I was not May, and she did not want her kids loving awful parents. My husband and I spoke about what happened, and he encouraged me in reaching out to the caseworker and explaining what was happening. This led to May being removed from my sister-in-law and her husband's care. My sister-in-law knew it had been us immediately. My husband attempted to take all the blame, but my sister-in-law said she knew it was me. She told me I had taken away May's stability again, and how dare I interfere when I was told to stay out of it. The rest of my husband's family said we should have kept out of it, and it really wasn't any of our business. My husband told them it was wrong what his sister and her husband were doing to May, but they all believe I was too close to the background to understand it was not my place. Am I the a-hole? No, you are not the a-hole for advocating for May's well-being and understanding the importance of her relationship with her mother as a former foster child. Your actions were driven by empathy and concern for May's emotional needs in a delicate situation, even if your sister-in-law and her husband viewed it differently. It's commendable that you stood up for what you believed was right, despite facing opposition from your husband's family. Am I the antagonist for refusing to let my child stay over their grandparents' place for the summer? A little backstory. I, 23 years old female, had a forced marriage, technically arranged, but I felt like I couldn't say no. At 18, I was very mentally ill, and my dad just wanted to get rid of me essentially. I had my son before my 19th birthday, and due to my mental illness and how my in-laws treated me, I never bonded with him. They were a constant presence in my home with my ex-husband and barely let me have my own son. And I had no support from anyone since I was in a new country. I filed for divorce a few months later, and my ex-husband won custody of my son because he was a man in his 20s with a stable job, and I was a mentally ill woman with no means to look after this child. After this, I moved back to my mother's country. She never approved of the marriage but was unable to help due to being abroad and other factors, and I wasn't allowed to visit my son. On to the issue. A few months ago, I got a call from my father. I don't speak to him because of the marriage he forced me into, so I was surprised to hear from him. Turns out my ex was no longer able to care for our son. He married a woman who didn't want to be a stepmother, and they wanted to know if I could take him. I said yes, and a few weeks later my little boy was in my home, and I had him enrolled in school. It took me a while to get his citizenship sorted, but it's finally been done. As it stands legally in my country, I have sole custody. In my son's country of birth, my ex is also registered with the necessary officials to let them know he has given up my son to me, and I have full custody over there too. It took us a few weeks to get used to each other, but he was already calling me mom and telling me he loved me very early on. I took time off work to get to know him better, and we are inseparable. It's nearing summer, and his grandparents, my ex-in-laws, have been asking me to send him to them for the summer. I refused for 3 reasons. 1. They were a big part of why I lost him in the first place. Imagine being newly postpartum, recovering from a horrifying birth experience, and not being allowed to hold your own baby and having no one to turn to. Everyone who cared about me was in my mother's country. 2. They might not let me have him back, and then I'll have to sue, and it will be very expensive and traumatic. 3. I asked him if he wanted to see them, and he said he wanted to stay with me. I passed this information on to them, and they're going mad. I'm being harassed on social media, and my family back in their country is blowing up my phone. My ex is also telling me that the only reason he gave my son to me instead of his parents was that he promised them they would still be allowed to see him. They've all been saying I'm an asshole for refusing to let them see my son, but I don't think I'm wrong given my reasons. I suggested they come visit us, and I would even let them stay in my home, but they have refused. Am I the asshole? You are definitely not the asshole in this situation. Your reasons for not sending your son to his grandparents for the summer are completely valid, considering the history of how they treated you and your son's own preference to stay with you. It's important to prioritize your son's well-being and comfort, and it's great that you are open to them visiting instead. Am I the antagonist for being disrespectful and telling my parents good luck with that when they tried to ground me? I live at home while going to university. I'm in my final year, and I have a job lined up after I graduate. My parents have been charging me rent since I was 16. I have a small company that makes me about $60,000 a year. I started it in high school. It is one of the reasons I graduated early from high school and why I got attention from recruiters. My parents said that since I was earning adult money, I could take in adult responsibilities. I thought that was fair. So I paid for all my own stuff starting at age 16. Not university. I got a scholarship. And the rent they charged me was minor, $300 a month. But I basically considered my room to be completely mine after that. I kept it tidy because I like it that way. But they had no say in when I cleaned it. When I did my laundry, other than to not do it at a time when I would disturb the family, for example, 3 a.m. I bought food for myself, and I ate when I wanted. They tried to say I was separating myself from the family, but I saw it more as having my own schedule. This year for spring break, I went down to Mexico with friends. My parents were upset because they were hosting a big Easter family get-together. When I got back, they said I was behaving badly by not being around for a family gathering. I said it was my last spring break in university and that I was not responsible for their schedule. They said I was grounded and I laughed and said good luck with that. I went to my room and locked the door. They tried banging on it for my attention, but I'm done. My grandfather came over to talk to me later. He is the one who helped me get my company started and he is always there for me. He said that I was rude to my parents when they were trying to be there for me. I asked him how much rent he charged my mom when she lived at home. He said it was ridiculous to think he would charge his kids rent. I told him that I had been paying rent for 4 years. He went into the house and I heard a fight. When he came out, he said that I need to treat my parents with more respect, but that since they are my landlords, they do not have a say over how I spend my time. I'm avoiding my parents for now and I'm renting on Airbnb right now until I graduate. I took everything that was important to me and I left $600 for the last 2 months I had planned on being there. They keep calling me, but I am currently getting ready to move for my new job. I don't have the energy to deal with them. It sounds like you've been very independent at a young age, which is impressive. While it's understandable you want your own space, communication with your parents about your plans and expectations could help navigate the situation more smoothly. Am I the antagonist for demolishing our family home while my siblings were on vacation? I'm not the type of person who would ask strangers for advice, but I'm genuinely too embarrassed to tell my friends. I'm also terribly guilt-ridden and confused. One minute I think I'm fully in the right and the next I think I'm being horrible. My parents died 4 months ago due to long-standing health issues and old age. My mother first and then 3 weeks later my father. My parents had 2 sons and 1 daughter. I'm 38. My brothers are 46 and 47. My brothers lived at my parents' house. All their lives our parents catered to them hand and foot. They fed their egos 3 meals a day. As they aged, it became harder and harder. Eventually, they were just worn out by my brothers. Throughout the last few years, my parents tried to set boundaries, but my brothers took it as a declaration of war. In the end, they pretty much lived in fear of my brothers. When my parents died, they left me the house and some money. I was truly surprised. I, like everyone else, assumed my brothers would get it all. They left a letter saying they greatly regretted having favored my brothers and for having to rely on me in their old age, and as compensation for having financially supported them the past 15 years. They left me the house, and for $525,000 of insurance payouts to be divided between the 3 of us. They acknowledged in the letter that they know the house, and my $175,000 doesn't come close to financially compensating me, but they hoped it at least helped. My plans are to use my share of the inheritance to fix up the house. It's an old house, and it needs considerable amount of work to bring it up to code. My brothers had no intentions in helping me with the house. They continued being lazy, arrogant, and entitled. I continued to pay all the utility bills and whatever else the house needed. I couldn't afford to keep paying. I asked them to move out several times and they flat out refused. My brothers also went through their inheritance like it was nothing. They are quickly running out of money. They bought cars, went to Vegas, and just spent like there was no tomorrow. I had enough of trying to be reasonable, and I demolished half of the house while they were on their cruise. My brothers went on a cruise last month, and during their time away, I packed all their things into 2 storage units, and I paid 6 months in advance for them, and then I just let the construction crew start working on the house. My brothers returned to a construction site. They called and texted me a few hundred times, but I never picked up. Eventually they got other family members to call me. Everyone is making me out to be a monster. Apparently I'm a terrible sister and that my parents would be disappointed in me for leaving my brothers homeless and living in a motel. I feel like I've done enough for them. I've supported them in some way or another my whole life. I tried to be reasonable, but they are unreasonable and insanely entitled. While it's understandable that you are feeling guilt and confusion about the situation, it's also important to recognize that your parents' decision to leave you the house and money was their way of acknowledging the imbalanced dynamic with your brothers. Your actions may have seemed drastic, but sometimes tough love is necessary when dealing with entitled behavior that is negatively impacting your well-being. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist in the description.